Most relationship advice or courses talk a lot about communication. The reality is, you know how to talk, and I'm not here to tell you how to talk, although there will be some tips about communications. In fact, David has this thing called the 5 secrets of effective communication, because the word communication is such a important word in relationship work. But really, we want to go much deeper than just like what comes out of your mouth. And, welcome back to the channel, TEAM-CBT. We're talking all about here on this channel. And I want to talk about relationships in TEAM-CBT. We've done a lot of CBT talk, and we talked about the T and the E and the A and the M, especially for mood work. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about relationship work. I mean, have you ever had the same argument over and over, maybe even with different people, and kind of thought, you know, if they would just change, like, why do people keep doing this? And you're noticing this pattern about other people. Or if you thought about, like, why would good people do things or say things that hurt each other? Like, that just doesn't seem to make any sense. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So today we want to just sort of really basically cover, just in a brief nutshell, I'm going to keep this video under an hour, but it's probably going to be more than half an hour, of what does it look like in terms of improving a relationship when you're using the TEAM-CBT philosophy. Most relationship advice or courses talk a lot about communication. The reality is, you know how to talk, and I'm not here to tell you how to talk, although there will be some tips about communications. In fact, David has this thing called the 5 secrets of effective communication, because the word communication is such a important word in relationship work. But really, we want to go much deeper than just like what comes out of your mouth. And we want to look at the patterns you have and how can we change those patterns. We want to look at reducing blame and what that looks like, and what even is blame. It sounds like a kind of a bad word, like a negative word, like, oh, I would never blame someone, right? I just want to hold them accountable for what they are responsible for. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about like how to build empathy, and a little bit about how connection actually works, like what it means to feel connected to someone and improve kind of intimacy. Sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. When I get to like improve intimacy and that kind of thing. So most people, like I said, they do communicate. They know how to communicate. It's just that it ends up blowing up into these like crazy kind of thing. So it's kind of a misnomer that we don't know how to communicate. Or how to express our feelings. That actually happens pretty regular, although I definitely have people who say to me, I don't think I'm expressing my feelings well. Yes, that's kind of the key, right? Is, are we expressing ourselves in a way that creates connection or puts up a wall? So these ideas largely come from the work of Dr. David Burns. In fact, we're going to look at this book, Feeling Good Together. We're not going to get into this book really in depth, but I highly encourage you to get this book. And the concepts are in here. It's not super big, like there's my thumb. You know, it's not a huge book, but it's really good. It's written from the perspective of intimate partners, marriage, that kind of thing. But definitely he talks about other types of relationships, and you can use the tools that we're about to talk about for multiple different kinds of relationships. So just a heads up on that. All right. So I want to start off with the first biggest myth there is about relationships, and that is that relationships are 50-50. Just throw that idea out the window. That's not true. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as 50-50. Think of a baby and mama. We're talking probably 2 to 5% the baby and 98% the mom. Is that a bad relationship? No, of course not. It's just normal. And I think we've gotten to this idea that, well, but we're equals and we're partners, and so doesn't that mean 50-50? No. Sorry, it doesn't, because there are going to be things that you're really good at in your relationship, in your marriage, and in your friendships, and other things you're not so good at. And the things you're good at, you might put in 80 or 90% or even 100% of that thing, that skill, behavior, energy, emotion, and what your partner's good at might be theirs. So just get it out. Don't even try and think of equality. Don't create lists of like, you do this chore and I'll do this chore. Like, all of that needs to go out the window if you want connection. Now, if you're a boss and you want your employees to have a good work environment, and you're gonna divvy up the tasks at hand, of course you're gonna do that, of course. And if you're in a relationship where you're trying to figure out like, how are we gonna balance the budget, or what hobbies are we gonna have, of course we're gonna do that. So what I'm talking about today is about connection and intimacy and getting out of our stuck fighting conflict patterns, okay? So don't think of this video as like everything you need to know about communicating with any other human being. No, this is about connection and feel and love and those kinds of like the more emotional part of the relationship. Okay. So in TEAM, what we say is a relationship is 100% me and 100% you. No more. Throw out the 50-50. Now, my 100%, like I said, if it was a baby, what can they contribute to the relationship is going to look very different than what mom can contribute. And the same is true of friendships. I've had friendships with people who have mental illness. And so what they can contribute to our mutual relationship is very different than what I can contribute as a mental health professional to that same relationship. Now, I'm not trying to fix them. I'm not talking about being a mental health professional. I just mean I have a set of skills and I have emotional stability from both my training and work and my faith and my own relationships that I can provide a lot more in that relationship. And that's not a bad thing. The trick is having multiple relationships so that you're not always finding yourself in a relationship where you're always the caregiver. I'm going to use that in air quotes because I think that's not entirely true. You don't have to be a caregiver to be in a relationship that feels a little imbalanced. In fact, it doesn't even feel imbalanced for me to be in those relationships. I just know I have variety of relationships, and that's as far as I label it. But okay, so I want to talk a little bit about a concept called circular causality, which relates to this 100% me and 100% you. Think of a relationship as its own entity in some ways. And we have this circular causality in that we trigger each other for good or bad. Like, you can be with a friend who like triggers you to do fun things, but then also our reactions kind of trigger other people's reactions and like emotions start ramping up and they spiral because we trigger each other. And so your reactions will trigger mine trigger yours. And so we never know who's actually causing what in a relationship. We just don't. And I'm sorry if that just sounds like really off-putting to you, but the problem is we don't know because it's a circle. Like, where does the circle start and end? I don't know. Do you know where a circle starts and ends? I mean, if you can figure that out, I'm sure you're going to get a Nobel Prize for physics because I've just never found the start and stop of a circle. And that's how relationships are. They're a circle, right? EFT will use the words withdrawer and pursuer to create like these patterns, right? The pursuer needs to fix the relationship right now and they pursue, and the withdrawer's like, no, I got to think about it. I need time. And so they withdraw, and the more they withdraw, the more that triggers pursuit in the pursuer because they feel like they're being abandoned and rejected and alone. And so then they grab on more, and that makes the withdrawer pull back even more because it's not that the pursuer caused it or the withdrawer caused it. It's just the combination as they come together, it happens and just creates more and more. It's like a dance, really. And so I want to clarify a couple things. One is we're going to talk about blame and responsibility. And so taking ownership and responsibility is not the same thing as blame and causation, because we just learned it's a circle, right? And what we want to do is give you back power. We want to empower you to make changes. And in TEAM-CBT, we've learned that you can fix relationships with just one person. Not always fair for sure. Like, maybe never fair, but you can do it. Like, there's power in you changing, because remember that circular causality, that I always cause reactions in my partner, and the partner causes, or friend, or spouse, or I already said partner, so that's spouse, but child or parent. So now I'll just briefly, actually, let me do that right now. So, because I mentioned child and parent, there are power dynamics at play in certain relationships. There's no getting it, like boss, employee, parent, child. I can't think of anything. There's probably more. I just can't think of them on the top of my head. And in power dynamics, of course, more responsibility lays on the person with the more authority or control or power in that relationship. And so that's really important to understand. And when we're saying we want to empower people, we're not saying now the child needs to correct parents' behavior. No, just that if a teen comes to me and they want to stop arguing so much with their parents, if that's what they would like, I have the tools to empower that teen to do that without fixing the parents. That's what I'm saying. So it's just a matter of like, is that ideal? No, of course not. Ideal would be the parents came to me, right? That would be the ideal. That would be the best case scenario. And so, but I'm not going to limit working with someone. I'm not going to stand on some moral high ground to say, this is the way it should be, and I'm only going to do it this way because that's the right way. That's the best way. I want to help everyone who is wanting help. And full stop. Okay. All right. Power dynamics aside. And then I think I'm going to talk about this later, but just really briefly, just in case I don't. Actually, I'm going to talk about it right now. So actually, Cassie, cut that part out. All right, there are 3 options in any relationship. One is status quo. Just everything stays the same. And this is what most people pick for most of their relationships for most of the time. Nothing wrong with that. The other option is leaving a withdrawal. The other option is to leave a relationship or withdraw. Talk a little bit about that in a minute. And the third option is to improve it. All right? Does that make sense? There's only 3 options, right? Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry, Cassie. Oh, gosh. Okay. Yeah, 3 options. All right. Now, most people coming for relationship counseling or looking to improve relationship, most people secretly want the 4th option, this miracle option. And that is that they stay the same while the other person changes. Or some version of that. Now, like most people will say, oh, I'm willing to change. I'm willing to invest in this relationship. But then when you get them into a conflict description and you start having them talk back and forth, it's pretty clear they've dragged their partner into therapy because they want the partner to change. Because if they wanted to change, they wouldn't need to drag their partner into the session. Right? It's just the way it is. And I'm guilty of this too. Sorry. That happens to me too. Like, I'm like, well, why can't, if my husband could just learn the 5 secrets, if my husband would just read this book, we would be like way better off. We all do it. Everybody does this. So I don't want you to feel like I'm singling anyone out that maybe decided they'd like to take their partner to therapy. We all do it. We all secretly want this thing where it's like, whew, I'm right, yay, like scold the other person, which feels good. Nobody likes to feel in the wrong. Nobody wants to be the wrong one, of course. And it's not about right and wrong. That language could just go out the window when we're talking about this kind of stuff. Although we're going to talk a little bit about right and truth and things in a minute. Okay, so relationship work is hard work, especially from this perspective. Because in this perspective, we're not going to talk endlessly about attachment and about trauma and about, like how you're so broken and your partner needs to understand that, because now we've put all this pressure on other person, which you have no control over, by the way. In this particular model, in team, we want to give you the control again, you the power to take it or leave it however you want, right? You may, like, list those three options, right? Maybe it's not worth the effort. Like, maybe everything's okay with your neighbor. Maybe it's not great. You're not best friends, but you're not fighting all the time, and you do argue over some things, but not other things. It's like, do you really want to invest a whole bunch of time? I talk so much on the camera wiggles. Okay, let me back up to neighbor. Let's take a neighbor, for example. Maybe things are okay. Like, they're not super great. You're not like best friends, but you're not, enemies. And so, like, why would you spend more time investing in that? Our lives are busy. There's only so much we can do to be close and connected to the people around us. And frankly, we can't be super intimate and vulnerable and close with every single person we come in contact with, right? Like, it's just not physically possible. And so most of your relationships, status quo, no problem with that. And you may choose, like, after you listen to all of this, you might be like, it's not really worth all that work to make this relationship any better. It's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're continuing to grow and improve in your own mental health and your own journeys. So, okay. The second option, which was leave, this may be the case in really imbalanced relationships where there's a huge power struggle to the point of abuse. And I can never give anyone advice. Like, this has got to be a personal decision, because a lot of times it can be dangerous to leave a really abusive situation, and that's got to be done very carefully. I really encourage you to get professional advice. There are all kinds of women's support programs, and there's even some for men and LGBTQ plus communities. So I encourage you to explore that. I don't think you should stay out of fear of retribution or retaliation, but I also think you should be cautious and careful and get support. Okay, that's one caveat. The other is, in mutually abusive relationships, one person can really feel like a victim. Both are getting battered and bruised emotionally, physically, or both. And there's this circular causality at play, and we can empower someone to make changes. Now, this is on YouTube, and I'm terrified at even saying that out loud on YouTube. Okay, so let me say this again. You have every right to have safety and security and find the person that you can connect with and love with and not be beat up emotionally or physically. All right? You have every right to explore that option, 100%. I just want you to do that carefully. And I want you to also know, if there's some reason you can't get out or you don't want to, there might be a religious reason, there might be a financial reason, there might be a moral reason, I don't know. There might be whatever reason you can't get out. I want you to know that some of these tools can help change the relationship. They may or may not change the other person. They might still be a narcissistic jerk, but they will change the relationship, because a relationship cannot stay the same if you've changed. All right. I'm not going to talk about that much more than that. And I'm positive many people will totally misunderstand what I'm saying and be really upset by this. I can only say I hope you just understand that I'm not saying a victim creates an abusive person. Not saying that. Okay? But that we can empower people to do things in a way that might make some changes for their own protection and safety. All right. So let's explore now why blame feels good in non-abusive relationships. Let's set that one aside, and let's talk about sort of like the everyday normal relationships you might be in. And also keep in mind, abusive relationships are on a scale as well. Like, someone can be, I would say that I've been in emotionally abusive relationships. It's such a big word, but if I were to give it a number from 1 to 10, it was probably a 2, in which case it's very easy for me to influence and change that relationship, and the abuse just stops, right? Now, if we're at a 10, that might be applying to, like, time to move on and leave and get out. So let's just, it's really hard, because my conflict phobia self wants to just avoid talking about that whole thing completely, especially on a platform like YouTube. I just can't. I can't ethically ignore it. So I just hope people will take this with a grain of salt and understanding and common sense. All right, that's the biggie. Like common sense, people. Like I'm like if someone's about to be murdered, I'm like 5 secrets are not. Well, there's a podcast on that. I'm going to put it in the description. I'll put a link to a podcast where the 5 secrets saved someone's life. So, and prevented them from being raped. Again, I'm just going to put in the link in the description for your perusal. Again, empowerment does not mean blame. Okay? All right. Going to repeat myself because I just feel like that's really going to be misunderstood. All right, so let's go into blame now. What is this word blame? Well, first of all, the word blame does not feel nice. We don't like the word blame, like not in the context of, oh yes, I blame people. But actually the blaming feels good. Like it feels good to blame others because what we're doing is like, I'm right and you're wrong, and it feels superior and strong, and like it's just, there's some really good feelings when it comes to that. And David doesn't like to sugarcoat things. Like we have like the cost benefit analysis, like the pros and cons of blame. Because being provocative and talking about this, like using the word blame is one. If you're willing to hear, you might be blaming others. If you're just willing, you're likely in the right frame of mind to do this kind of work. Whereas if that word just totally sets you off, then this is not the right modality or the right work for you right now, right? So like if it's just like even if you hear about what I was talking about earlier in abuse, and which you probably have already turned off the channel if that's the case, or moved on to a different video, but then that's not the right moment for you to be working on this, right? So using really quite provocative and harsh language like blame helps to know, are we in the right frame of mind to do this kind of work? Because there's all kinds of mental health work that we need to do on our journey to wholeness and healing, and relationships kind of like 3rd, 4th, 5th on the list. It's not the first let's go fix our relationships while we're dealing with depression and anxiety and feeling inferior and self-worth and being detached from our emotions, or all these other things that can be happening. Relationships is like lower on the list of those. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is we remember key concepts better when we're kind of triggered. We're kind of like, blame, the benefits of blame, like that just, it resonates, like you sticks in your mind. The CBA of blame, like the good and bad of blame. And that kind of helps. I hope that understands in the team context why we use some of these words. So think of blame as a word that encompasses kind of a range of like simply holding someone else accountable and responsible all the way. Like think of it as a scale all the way to like blaming them for every single problem in your relationship. Okay, like just think of that as like a big bubble word. So because blame feels so good and feels very morally satisfying, it becomes this resistance piece, this tension of not wanting to do the work myself and change because the other person is to blame. They're the ones that left the socks on the floor. They're the ones that always argue when I bring up this topic. They're the ones that don't listen to me, right? Which are all true statements. I'm not making that up. I'm not trying to like make it out that like, yeah, I'm not making that up. I don't know how you're going to cut that, Cassie. You can just leave it in. I don't care. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to tie together. But blame, sorry, not blame. This resistance that comes up is an important piece because it protects you. It's there to protect, who you are, your ego, and your moral compass, your values, and aligns with you being right and feeling right. But being right and being connected are two different goals. Remember early on I said that, what we're talking about today is not about all talking between humans. It's about connection and intimacy. And not all relationships will want to improve in that direction. Sometimes we want it status quo, like just want to let's just hold the line. Sometimes we want to leave a relationship because it's too toxic and problematic. But other times we do want to get closer to this person. It's just really hard. It's like, I don't know why I'm feeling so stuck. And we need to deal with this resistance piece to change, even though you want to be closer to this person. So, we want to look at the idea that you could win the argument and lose the relationship, or you can win the relationship and be neutral on the argument. I'm not going to say lose the argument, because it's almost like the argument is no longer the point. You're going to focus on the relationship rather than the argument. That might be the better way to say that. So one of the really important tools when we're doing relationship work is a CBA of blame, or the cost-benefit analysis of blame, where I look at all the reasons why I should keep holding this other person responsible and why I should blame them. And then afterwards, I'll look at some of the costs. But really, those aren't as important as really diving in to why it's important for me to hold this person accountable. And some examples are, it's justified. This other person is doing these X, Y, and Z, and that's very hurtful. And, of course, that's just truth, right? So why wouldn't that be important to me when I want people to take mutual responsibility? I think relationships should be mutually beneficial. And so of course, that's going to be a good one. Another might be to avoid vulnerability, avoid being in a situation where I feel less than or criticized, or they're going to take advantage of me. The list will just go on, and you have to be specific before, you can do kind of a general CBA of blame, and I was going to maybe want to put it up here, but I think I just want to talk about these concepts, otherwise the video will be too long. We'll maybe expand and do a whole video on each of these eventually. So think of that, there's just going to be a really long list of benefits to blaming and holding the other person accountable. But then there might be some costs. And one other thing we're going to do before going to costs is actually the cost of change. So we call this a paradoxical CBA, so normally when you look at a cost and benefit analysis, you're looking at the pros and the cons of something. But in the terms of relationship resistance, what we want to look at is all the benefits to blaming the other person, holding them accountable, and all the costs of you having to change, right? So it's not fair. The relationship should be mutual. We should both be reading the book and doing the homework, and it's a lot of work. The list can go on and on about the costs of you changing, and it'll be more specific once you can make this specific to your situation, and we pick a moment in time, we pick one event kind of that helped, that triggered it, and so we can be a little more specific, because your CBA will be different, but if you're a parent to your child, it might even be different for each child, and or it might be different if it's your grandparent and you, or a niece or a nephew, or might look different if it's a boss employee cost benefit, right? So these are going to look different, the benefits and the costs of change, not costs of blame, but costs of change. If we look at those two, they're going to look different in different relationships. So it's important to be really specific. But and then once we've done that, optionally we can look at the costs of blame, which is distance and defensiveness and loneliness, and end up in these repeating patterns of disconnection. Now in TEAM, the core work is called the 5 Secrets of Effective Communication, and I've talked about this a little bit in terms of with therapists and coaches. But I'm just gonna briefly introduce these. It is the core because I'd say it's almost impossible to do these genuinely and well if there isn't a change inside. So it's not a formula you can just speak out loud without there being a shift in the way you think about this person in your life. And so they're very transformative as you practice them. They're going to sound very simple. They're going to sound very similar to other types of communication tools like active listening and that kind of thing. But when you really just sort of slow down and dig deep with these tools, they are transformative. The act of practicing these tools will transform your mindset and your emotions toward this person. And they help build and create that intimacy, that connection, that feeling, loved and heard and understood. Which is interesting that you're going to feel loved and heard and understood, even though you're the one doing all the talking in this good way, this new way, well, air quotes, right? So the first one is called the disarming technique. And this is where we find the truth in what the other person is saying. And this is extremely difficult to do in the middle of a heated argument or in the middle of something very factual. If two people from opposite political sides are having a discussion about a particular political point, of agenda, this can be very difficult. And it's really important to know that we're trying to find the truth, not their truth, not their perspective. Oh, I could see how you would see it that way. We're not trying to do that. No, that's different, whole different set of relationship advice somewhere else. Not here. Here we want to find the truth. And so if you can't do this, you don't do it at all. We just skip this one and do one of the other 5 secrets. But I will say, if you try, almost always you can do this. Maybe it's a short thing that you could agree with. Maybe it's even rewording it slightly in order to agree with it. Or you might be able to agree with the concept behind what they said, the meaning behind the message, so to speak. And so that can be really hard. And then sometimes it's just really hard to admit it's right. So the other day I was in a situation where I got really defensive because people were telling me I didn't know what I was talking about, and I was pretty sure I knew what I was talking about because I had just read it in the law, in a legal document, and I'm like I just read this, and either you're saying I'm stupid or you're saying I'm lying. I'm a black and whiter. What can I say? And so if someone would have said, "Hey, you're getting defensive," I would have had to say, "You're right. I am defensive. I am." That's the truth. The truth is I'm being defensive right now, right? So, but that can be hard to say out loud, especially in a group that we're just telling you're wrong and this and that, and you don't want to look weak, right? It's like this biological instinct to puff up, these big birds that puff up, or I don't know, my cat, when he gets scared, his tail just goes poof. Because I'm bigger. Anyways, okay. So again, I'm just gonna skim over these. I know that doesn't sound like I'm skimming over, but there's more I could say. Lots more I could say about this. The next 5 secret is empathy, which concludes thought empathy and feeling empathy. And so this is where we acknowledge how the other person might be feeling. They might not verbally say, "I feel upset with you," but you can tell they're upset with you. It's what's up? You're really upset with me. And you were saying how, it's really annoying when I keep telling you to pick up your socks, right? So thought empathy is repeating back some of the words they said, their own words, not paraphrasing, not interpreting, not making it into your words, none of that. We're going to use their words, not word for word. We're not going to parrot it back, but we're going to use, some of their adjectives and nouns that they were saying, and we're going to combine that with how we think they might be feeling. And if you're not sure, you can use that as part of the next 5 secret, the third one, called inquiry. Now, usually inquiry, I put at the very end of a conversation, not end of a conversation, but when I'm doing 5 secrets, we do 1 or 2, but typically do more than 1 because 1 can feel odd, usually, not always. So usually I'm doing 2 to 4 of the 5 secrets, in a back and forth with someone, and I might use this 2 and then maybe that 2 and then maybe this 3. So it just, you kind of mix and match as you're talking this. When you're learning them, you just pick one and practice it over and over for a week, and then you do another one. So inquiries, these gentle questions, inviting the person to talk more about their experience. So these aren't, we wouldn't ask clarifying questions like, well, what did you mean when you said Trump did blah blah blah, or Putin did da 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 da, like like it's not that's not what the inquiry is for. Again, remember I said earlier, there's lots of communication and talking that humans do that's very good and very important, that's not about connection, right? So just bear with me here. This kind of inquiry is inviting the person. Is really, when you use this kind of invitation, you are expressing your desire to connect with them deeper. And that can open up your own heart to then feel more connected as they then answer the question. And they feel more connected, which means they're going to change how they're expressing themselves to you. And it's just a really beautiful way of doing inquiry. So that's why inquiry is very specific when we're doing the 5 secrets. The fourth 5 secret is I feel statements, or we sometimes say self-disclosure, but I feel is really important, especially in a conflict, like the feelings first, and then we may do some self-disclosure as well. But let me explain both of those. So I feel is just like it says, I feel upset and annoyed. I feel defensive and tense as you're arguing with me. And I want to just pause for a moment and like, I wonder if you're feeling tense as well. Like, I wonder if you're like here I am trying to prove my point, which means I'm not listening to you. And then I'm upset because you're not listening to me, and we're both kind of doing the same thing. Are you noticing that too? So there's kind of like this I feel and a bit of inquiry, right? And then the other piece of like self-disclosure is more like, yeah, I heard your dog died and my heart goes out to you. I feel so sad. I lost my cat 2 years ago. And he was such a big part of my life. He just brought me so much warmth and joy. And I can imagine it's just really heartbreaking that you don't have your dog anymore. Like, just tell me more. What was he like? And what are you going to miss about him? So, I told a little bit of my story that helps to show I do understand. So rather than saying, so like in team, we would never say, I understand. It's patronizing, and you're not demonstrating you actually get it. You may or may not understand. And the only way to know if you understand is to demonstrate it by either sharing a story. And if the other person goes, well, that's not the same thing, blah, 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 blah. Don't take it personal. That's just good information. Okay, that wasn't what they were thinking. And now you have some more information in order to connect deeper on a different level. So giving a little information. And the last of the 5 secrets is called stroking. I don't love the word. But David loves cats. He loves them. Petting kitty, pet the kitty. Stroke the kitty. Or, people used to just like give it a little stroke, like there. Which can sound a little patronizing, but it's really conveying warmth and respect. And this can be done non-verbally with smiles and a tap on the shoulder and a hug and holding hands. But we also want to practice doing it verbally and saying something about the person that is encouraging to them and says something you like about them that's positive and reassuring. So I'm not so sure about reassuring. Excuse me. Let me do that again. Sorry. I had a peanut butter cookie. I'm not sure what I said. Stroking. So stroking, we also want to do it verbally, and very important to practice it verbally, because it's important for, I just realized I'm doing and because I didn't do a script. But that's okay. I'm going to have some It doesn't need to distract me. The other thing but not only nonverbal, with stroking, we want to practice doing it verbally. What kinds of things can you say that would be encouraging to their person, in the sense of like, what is it that you like about them? What do you find valuable to you as a person? What do you think is important about them and who they are, like their values? So it might sound something like, I love how much you care about our kids. When I see your eyes light up when you're playing Lego with them, it just warms my heart. So like delete that like. All right, so all of what I've said, there's not about a manipulation or anything like that. They only work if they're genuine. They do have to be specific. You have to mean it. And you're only going to use the 5 secrets that you can do genuinely, and ignore the other ones in that moment. But try them. I'm not going to go into, I had some ideas about bad communication. I'm not going to do that today. We'll do that another time. The other thing in team that's really important is we focus a lot on the process and not the topic. So we're, like if a client or a couple, can be an individual or a couple, team therapists, some team therapists will do couples, some will do individuals, and some will do both. And I exclusively only do individuals. So couples come to me, one picks who wants to do the work, and they're the ones that come. And then I refer the other person to another colleague who also does individual work, because there's so much that can come up, and we want you to be able to really be able to talk openly without hurting the other person. And so it's really important to do that kind of individual kind of work, even when we're talking relationships. And then if you'd like to do a couples work with someone who can kind of help you with the back and forth and the flow, there are definitely therapists who excel in that. And so, it's no wrong or right way to do that. So, but either way, a team therapist will focus on the process. They're not going to try and mediate for you a hot topic or something like that. It's not about the socks or the dishes or text messages or money. It's about feeling unseen, feeling rejected, control, maybe feeling unsafe or unimportant, and those kinds of feelings. So it's usually and then the patterns that we have that we've brought with us from childhood and teens and being young adults and that kind of thing. The other thing we will explore in team is relationship rules that we create. And so we have a concept called the interpersonal downward arrow, or rules versus roles. And it's a 4-quadrant worksheet where we look at you and one other person and kind of all the adjectives you would describe yourself in the relationship, how you describe the other person in the relationship, how that feels to be in that relationship, and what does that mean about these unspoken subconscious rules that are existing in this relationship. And then, would you like to change those rules? Like, I always have to be submissive. They are always right. I'm the wrong one. They're the right one. The list is endless. This is a more advanced kind of technique and tool, and I'd have to do a whole video just on this one form, but it's a really great one. And this one we can do at any stage of relationship work. We might do it at the beginning, I might do it a little later on, as sort of like this insight into the patterns that I create in these relationships. Looking at my time. Okay, so there are many more tools that we use in TEAM-CBT to do with relationship work. There's forced empathy, there's some role plays, we might even do some mood work, like the feeling and fear. We might work on self-defeating beliefs around relationships, like approval addiction or submissiveness or fear of rejection. There's just so much more that we could expand on, but this video is just to give you an idea of what TEAM-CBT looks like when it comes to relationships, and I really wanted to just talk about the kind of those concepts. So here's just some key takeaways. 1, we cannot force the other person to change, so why would we try to learn techniques and tools that create the other person change? Like boundaries are for you, not the other person. We put up a fence to help establish boundaries, right? And the more protection I want that fence to be, I'm the one that makes that fence, and also keeps me in, right? Not just them out. So the fence kind of loses the analogy loses a little bit. Can't take it too far, but so we can't force someone else to change. I will say most of the time, if you change, the other person will change too, at least when they're interacting with you. You're not changing who they are as a person, but the relationship itself cannot stay the same if you are different, right? So that's really important. Real intimacy requires courage and effort to be different. There's humility, learning empathy, tools like those 5 secrets of communication, honesty, being genuine, and warmth, even when we feel really upset and annoyed and hurt. Connection grows when blame decreases and understanding increases. And I would invite you to learn more about TEAM-CBT, the 5 secrets. I'm going to show the book again. Feeling Good Together is a great book. And I'm curious, like, what relationship patterns do you notice in yourself? And I didn't get into all of them. There's actually a list in here. But maybe you're noticing certain things, like maybe you always try to fix a relationship when it's kind of broken, or maybe you pull back and need to just process. Maybe truth is super important to you, which is probably most of us, and it can be more than one of these, by the way. Maybe you want to please everyone and you avoid conflict to like the nth degree. And it's funny because I have all of these, and so one minute I'm like conflict avoid, the next minute I'm like you're wrong. We're humans, right? We we're the ebb and flow. So again, I hope this video was somewhat encouraging in terms of like the things you can do to be empowered to change your relationships, and that there's lots of different ways to do that and lots of tools. And join me next time for more Talking TEAM-CBT.